Have you ever felt like life is always throwing challenges your way? Like every time you solve one problem, another one pops up right after? If so, welcome to the human experience. But what if I told you that this isn't a mistake, a punishment, or a flaw in the system? Buddhism teaches that suffering is not an accident of life, it is part of it. And more than that, understanding this can be the key to true freedom. When Buddha attained enlightenment, he didn't go around saying he had discovered a mystical secret or that simply having faith would make everything work out. He taught something much deeper and more profound, the Four Noble Truths. And they begin with a simple, yet brutally honest statement: life contains suffering. This is the first noble truth, dukkha. This word in Pali, the language used in ancient Buddhist texts, means more than just suffering. Dukkha is the constant dissatisfaction, the feeling that something is always missing. You could be in your dream job, in the perfect relationship, or living the best phase of your life, but there's always that little bit of anxiety, that fear of losing what you have, or that search for something more. In Buddhism, suffering isn't just about extreme physical or emotional pain. It's present in every human experience. But why do we suffer? That's the second noble truth. Suffering has a cause, and that cause is desire. And not just any desire, it's the uncontrolled attachment to the things we believe will bring us permanent happiness. We want money, love, recognition, stability. We want things to stay the way they are when we are happy, and we want them to change immediately when we're unhappy. The problem is, nothing lasts forever. The world is always changing. People change, our feelings change. But our attachment to these things creates suffering. And now for the good news. There's a way out. The third noble truth says that it's possible to end suffering. It doesn't mean you'll never feel pain or sadness again, but it means you can stop suffering over things you can't control. Buddhism teaches that when we stop desperately clinging to things, whether people, status, material possessions, or even our own ideas, we find deep peace. This state is called nirvana, which is not a place, but a liberation from the prison of desire. But how do you do that? That's the fourth noble truth. The path to the end of suffering exists, and it's called the Noble Eightfold Path. It's not a set of rigid rules, but a guide for living more consciously and balanced. It talks about acting with wisdom, cultivating good thoughts, speaking with compassion, living ethically, and developing the mind through meditation and self-awareness. The interesting thing is that this teaching isn't something abstract or religious. It's practical. Think about it. If you're always expecting life to be perfect to be happy, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But if you understand that pain and frustration are part of the process, you can start seeing difficulties as opportunities for growth. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a story that illustrates this concept brilliantly. It's about a woman named Kisa Gautami who lost her only child and, desperate, went to Buddha asking for a miracle to bring him back to life. Buddha said he could help her, but first, she needed to bring a mustard seed from a house where no one had ever lost a loved one. She went from house to house, and in every house, she found people who had also lost someone. It was then that she realized that death wasn't something that had only happened to her. It was part of everyone's life. Upon understanding this, she found peace. This story teaches us something powerful. Often, we suffer because we think our pain is unique, that the universe is against us. But when we understand that suffering is a universal experience, we begin to deal with it differently. Instead of resisting pain, we learn to accept it. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? We begin to ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? Buddhism doesn't deny suffering, but it also doesn't leave us trapped in it. It teaches us that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The difference between the two lies in how we react to them. So, if you're going through a tough time, remember this. Pain can be your greatest teacher, and accepting the impermanence of life may be the key to finding peace, no matter what your religion or belief is. Have you ever stopped to think about how many things you cling to in your everyday life? People, objects, moments, everything seems to carry such a heavy weight, as if everything we acquire must be grasped with all our might out of fear of losing it. But what if I told you that this attachment, this need to hold on to everything, could be the very cause of your suffering? Buddhism teaches that everything in life is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. Not joy, not sorrow, not the things you have, not the people you know. And that's where the concept of anicca, impermanence, comes in. If everything changes, why do we insist on clinging as if it will last forever? Imagine you're holding sand in your hand. If you squeeze too hard, the sand slips through your fingers. If you let go completely, it will be carried away by the wind. But if you hold it gently, you can appreciate it without suffering. That's what non-attachment is. It's about living fully, but without the illusion of possession. And this applies to everything. Have you ever noticed how people suffer when they try to keep everything under control? They try to hold on to a relationship that's already over, a job that no longer makes sense, an image of themselves that no longer represents who they are. The fear of change traps us, but the truth is, everything is always changing. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a story that illustrates this perfectly. Once, a king asked the kingdom's wise man for a phrase that would be true in any situation, both in good times and bad. The wise man responded with just 4 words, "This too shall pass." The king was intrigued, but over time, he realized the depth of those words. When he was happy, he remembered that the moment wouldn't last forever, so he enjoyed it more fully. When he was sad, he also remembered that it would pass, and he found the strength to move forward. You might think, but does Buddhism teach that we should be cold and not care about anything? No, non-attachment doesn't mean becoming insensitive. Quite the opposite. It teaches us to love more deeply, to live moments more fully, because we know nothing is guaranteed. There's another story in Buddhism that explains this very well. The story of the already broken cup. A monk drank tea every day from his favorite cup, but always said, "This cup is already broken." People around him thought it was strange because the cup was still intact. But one day, it fell and broke. The monk, without any sadness, simply smiled and said, "I knew this was going to happen. That's why I enjoyed every sip of tea as if it were the last." This story is powerful. It teaches us that everything we have, everything we love, is already broken in the sense that one day it will no longer exist. Our possessions, our relationships, even our own bodies. So why not live more lightly? Why not enjoy without fear? Now, you might be wondering, how can I apply non-attachment in real life? The answer lies in valuing the now, accepting that you cannot control everything, and practicing gratitude for every moment you have. When you embrace the impermanence of life, you begin to appreciate what is before you, knowing that everything, both good and bad, will eventually pass. And that knowledge, rather than causing fear, can free you to live more fully. Have you ever felt like life is passing by too quickly? Like you blink and it's already Monday again? It seems like we're always waiting for something, waiting for the weekend, waiting for vacation, waiting for the right time to start something new. But while we're waiting, life is happening, right now, at this very moment. The truth is, most people simply don't live in the present. We're always with our heads elsewhere. When we're working, we're thinking about our vacation. When we're on vacation, we're worried about work. When we're eating, we're on our phones. When we're on our phones, we're scrolling the feed without even noticing what we're seeing. And so life goes by and we don't even realize it. But what if I told you that Buddhism has a teaching that could completely change the way you live your daily life? This teaching is called mindfulness. In Buddhism, it's known as sati, and it basically means being 100% present in the moment. Sounds simple, right? But try to remember the last time you truly paid attention to what you were doing. Like, really. Most of us live on autopilot, and this happens because our minds love to travel between the past and the future. We dwell on things that have already happened, blaming ourselves, asking what if, or we get anxious, imagining 1,000 scenarios of what could go wrong tomorrow. But Buddha said something that makes perfect sense. The past is gone, the future hasn't arrived. All you have is the now. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a passage that speaks exactly about this. Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." And that makes complete sense, because if you're not living in the now, when are you really going to live? Now, you might be thinking, okay, but how do I do that? How do I stop living on autopilot? The good news is that Buddhism teaches several simple ways to train your mind to be more present. Here are 3 things you can start practicing right now. First, breathe. It might sound silly, but breathing is the simplest and most powerful way to bring you back to the present. The next time you notice your mind drifting, stop for a second and just focus on your breath. Feel the air coming in and out. This brings you into the now. Second, do one thing at a time. We have this habit of wanting to do 1,000 things at once, but that only makes everything more exhausting. If you're eating, just eat. If you're talking, truly listen to the person. If you're taking a shower, feel the water, the scent of the soap. The more present you are in what you do, the more pleasure you'll take from the small things. Third, accept the moment as it is. Often what causes us to suffer isn't what's happening, but our resistance to it. We fight reality all the time. For example, it's raining and you get frustrated because you wanted sunshine. But what can you do about it? Nothing. So why waste energy? When you stop fighting against what is and simply accept it, life becomes much lighter. There's a story in Buddhism that explains this brilliantly. A monk was crossing a river in a little boat, just peacefully, when suddenly another boat crashed into his. Right away he got angry and was about to shout at the guy who hit him. But when he looked closely, he realized that the other boat was empty. It was just the current that had carried it there. The monk laughed and continued on his way, but then he realized something much bigger. Every time we get angry or frustrated, it's because we think the other boat is full. We think people are attacking us on purpose, that life is against us. But most of the time, the boat is empty. Things happen, and there's not always someone to blame. When we understand this, we stop reacting impulsively and begin to live with more peace. In the end, mindfulness isn't just a spiritual practice, it's a way of living. It's about getting out of autopilot and truly seeing what's happening around you. It's about stopping the habit of worrying about what's already passed or what hasn't even happened yet and starting to be here, now. Because if you don't live this moment, when will you live? Have you ever felt like life is sometimes a pendulum swinging between extremes? One moment, you dive headfirst into pleasures, overeat, overspend, and have fun without thinking about tomorrow. Then, when you realize the excesses, your conscience hits you and you swing to the other extreme. You follow radical diets, cut your spending, deprive yourself of everything, and try to be perfect. And so, we oscillate between excess and deprivation, never finding true balance. Buddhism teaches that the answer to this lies in the middle path. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, it came from Buddha's own experience. Before attaining enlightenment, he lived both extremes of existence. First, he was a prince surrounded by luxury and comfort with everything money could buy. But he realized that this didn't bring him true happiness. So he decided to go to the other extreme. He became an ascetic, fasting until nearly dying, spending days in deep meditation, sleeping on the ground, and depriving himself of all pleasures. But in the end, this also didn't bring him enlightenment. It was only when he realized that both extremes were flawed paths that he found the true answer. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there is a passage that illustrates this symbolically. One day, Buddha was meditating near a river when he heard a musician teaching his student how to play the lute. The teacher said, "If you tighten the strings too much, they'll break. If you leave them too loose, they won't make any sound. The secret is in the right tension." At that moment, Buddha had a revelation. Life also needs that right tension. If you indulge too much in pleasures, you become a slave to them. If you deprive yourself too much, you lose the joy of life. The balance lies in finding the middle ground between these two poles. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but how does this work in practice? In life, the key is to not live for pleasure, but not reject it either. The problem isn't in experiencing pleasure, it's when pleasure becomes an obsession. Eating a sweet is great, but becoming addicted to sugar and eating out of anxiety can bring suffering. Having fun is essential, but escaping your problems by drowning yourself in parties, alcohol, or social media all the time can be a sign of imbalance. The key is learning to enjoy without being controlled by desires. Self-discipline is important, but it must be sustainable. Many people think being productive means working until exhaustion, but effort should be manageable. It's no use forcing yourself into a perfect routine full of rules and sacrifices if it's not something you can maintain in the long run. True progress comes from the balance between discipline and flexibility. Listening to your body and mind is also essential. If you constantly feel tired, perhaps you're demanding too much of yourself. If you feel your life lacks purpose, maybe you're too caught up in distractions and superficial pleasures. The middle path is about observing yourself and adjusting the course whenever necessary. There's a story in Buddhism that explains this very well. It's said that a disciple went to Buddha and asked, "Master, should I dedicate myself to spiritual practice all the time, or can I enjoy life?" Buddha replied, "If an archer pulls the bowstring too hard, it will break. If he doesn't pull it enough, the arrow won't go anywhere. To hit the target, you must find the right measure." And this is the big insight. Life isn't about renouncing everything, nor about losing yourself in excess. It's about finding a rhythm that works for you. So, before jumping into a new extreme, stop and ask yourself, is this choice bringing me balance? Because, in the end, true happiness is not found in extremes. It's found in the middle of the path. When someone says that's karma, they're usually referring to a kind of cosmic punishment, as if the universe is watching everything and waiting for the right moment to return things in kind. But this idea of karma is completely wrong. In Buddhism, karma has nothing to do with luck or punishment. It's not a system of rewards and punishments, and it's definitely not something mystical. Karma is in fact one of the simplest and most logical laws of life, the law of cause and effect. What you do today shapes what you will live tomorrow. Not because an invisible judge is counting your actions, but because everything you do generates natural consequences. If you plant kindness, you harvest good relationships. If you spread negativity, you create a toxic environment around you. Karma doesn't happen out of nowhere. It's not an immediate system where one action generates an instant return. Sometimes the result of something you did appears quickly. Other times it may take months, years, or even an entire lifetime. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a passage where a king asks Buddha, if karma is real, why do some bad people live long and prosperous lives, while some good people suffer from birth? In response, Buddha gave a brilliant example. He said, if you throw a handful of salt into a glass of water, the water will become undrinkable. But if you throw the same handful of salt into a large river, it won't make any difference. What does this mean? That each person's karma is like that river. Some have accumulated so many good actions that the small mistakes they make don't affect their lives as much. Others have carried a heavy load of bad choices, and any new error sinks them further into their conditions. What's clear in this story is that karma is not a debt and payment system, but a continuous process of influence. It doesn't punish or reward. It simply reflects the sum of the actions you put into the world. Then comes a common question, if what I do now is a consequence of my past, does that mean I'm stuck with my karma? No. Karma is not a fixed destiny. It's just a tendency. Your past actions influence your life, but they don't determine everything. At any moment, you can change your karma by choosing to act differently. If you've spent years being impulsive and making bad decisions, it doesn't mean your entire life is doomed, but it does mean that it will take time for new positive actions to bring new results. Karma works like planting a tree. If you've spent years sowing bad seeds, it's no use expecting everything to change overnight. But if from now on you start planting something different, over time, your harvest will be different too. This also applies to the opposite. A person can spend their whole life building good things, but if they suddenly start acting irresponsibly, everything can collapse. It's not about luck, and it's not about some invisible plan. It's about choices and consequences. There's a Buddhist story that illustrates this perfectly. It's said that a man threw small stones into a lake every day without realizing that with each little stone, small waves were forming and reaching the other shore. One day, he threw a bigger stone and saw the waves hit a boat on the other side. Only then did he realize that all of his actions, no matter how small, created waves and had an impact, even if he couldn't see it immediately. Karma is exactly like this. You throw stones into the water all the time, without realizing that these waves are traveling, reaching places you can't even imagine. Some come back quickly, others take time, but they all return. So, if you want a better future, the best thing you can do is start now by planting good seeds. Even if the results take time, they will always come. One curious thing about Buddhism is that it doesn't ask you to believe anything blindly. Unlike many philosophies and religions that say just trust, Buddhism teaches that true wisdom doesn't come from listening, reading, or following what someone else says. It comes from experiencing it for yourself. Buddha didn't want followers who simply accepted his words as absolute truth. In fact, he always said the opposite. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a passage where he says something very powerful. Do not believe something just because it is written in a sacred book. Do not believe because your teacher or guru said it. Do not believe just because everyone believes it. Experiment, observe, test for yourself. Only then, accept or reject. This teaching became famous as the Discourse to the Kalamas. It said that a group of people came to Buddha and said, many teachers come here and claim their words are the absolute truth, but they all say different things. How can we know who is right? And Buddha gave a brilliant response. Do not believe anything just because someone said it. Evaluate it with your own experience. If something makes you wiser, more compassionate, more serene, then follow that path. If something causes confusion, suffering, or ignorance, then abandon it. Now, think about the world we live in today. We are surrounded by information, opinions, and beliefs being thrown at us all the time. Politicians, influencers, motivational gurus, experts, everyone is absolutely certain that they are right. But how many people actually experience things before drawing conclusions? How many test ideas before adopting them as truth? In Buddhism, wisdom doesn't come from memorizing texts or following rules without questioning. It comes from directly observing reality. This completely changes the way we approach life. If you want to know if meditation really helps the mind, the best path is not to read 1,000 articles about it. It's simply to sit and practice. If you want to know if a habit is good for you, test it. Observe how you feel. Evaluate the results. And this applies to everything. Many people go through life following beliefs they've never stopped to question. They accept patterns, rules, and ideas imposed on them without ever asking themselves, does this really make sense? Does this work for me? There's a story in Buddhism that sums this up perfectly. Once a man went to a master and asked, "What should I do to find the truth?" The master picked up a stone and said, "Bite this." The man was confused, but obeyed. As soon as his teeth touched the stone, he felt an unbearable pain and pulled away. The master then smiled and said, "Now you know, from your own experience, that stones are not food. You no longer need to ask anyone." The moral of this story is clear. There are things we can only learn through practice. The problem is that many people want the easier path. They want someone else to tell them what to do, what to think, what to believe. But the truth is, the only way to truly know something is by living it. So, if you want to be a wiser person, start observing. See how your choices impact your life. Notice which habits bring peace and which bring chaos. Test ideas before adopting them as truth. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what others tell you. What matters is what you experience. Imagine that you are a king. You have everything you could ever want. Riches, a grand palace, servants to cater to your every whim, and an entire kingdom at your feet. But there's one thing that haunts you every day: death. This is the story of a king who, despite all the power he possessed, lived tormented by the idea that one day everything would end. He couldn't accept the thought that one day he would grow old, weak, and inevitably die. Determined to find a solution to this problem, the king ordered his scholars and alchemists to discover a way to make him immortal. He promised unimaginable wealth to whoever found the formula for eternal life. For years, the kingdom's greatest minds tried to create potions, develop rituals, and seek knowledge in distant lands, but none of them could prevent the inevitable. One day, the king heard of a monk who lived in the mountains and, according to rumors, knew the deepest secrets of existence. Without hesitation, the king gathered his caravan and set off to find this man. After a long journey, he found the monk meditating under a tree, simple and serene, with nothing but the clothes on his back. The king approached and asked directly, "Master, I am the most powerful king in this land, but there is something that not all my power can give me: immortality. Can you teach me how to live forever?" The monk looked at him and smiled faintly. Then he picked up a handful of dry leaves and tossed them into the wind. The leaves flew in all directions, swirling and dancing in the air before finally falling to the ground. The king, confused, asked, "What does this mean? I asked for the secret to immortality, not a trick with leaves." The monk then said, "Look at these leaves, Your Majesty. They were once attached to the tree, green and full of life, but over time they dried up and fell. This is nature. Everything that is born eventually dies. Everything that exists is in constant transformation." The king wasn't satisfied. "I already know this, but I am king. I am different. There must be a way to escape this fate." The monk looked into the king's eyes and calmly replied, "Then answer me this: where are the kings who came before you? Where are those who ruled 100,000 years ago? If power could prevent death, where are they now?" The king fell silent. For the first time, he truly stopped to think. There was no trace of the great kings of the past, except for the names etched in books and ancient stones. All of them had gone. The monk continued, "Your Majesty, you seek immortality, but immortality already exists. Not in your physical form, but in what you leave behind. Your actions, your words, the lives you touch, this is what remains. If you want to live forever, don't try to avoid death. Try to live in a way that your presence will be felt long after you're gone." The king returned to his palace in silence. For the first time in his life, he realized he had been asking the wrong questions. Instead of trying to escape death, he should focus on how he wanted to be remembered. From that day on, he began to rule in a fairer way, helping his people and leaving a legacy that would echo for generations. Buddhism teaches us that fighting against impermanence is futile. Everything changes, everything transforms, but true immortality lies in the impact we make on the lives of others. And you? How do you want to be remembered? Who are you? If I ask you this right now, you'll probably answer with your name, your profession, or something about your personality. Maybe you'll say you're anxious, confident, outgoing, or reserved. You might even mention your preferences, like I love coffee or I hate waking up early. But now comes the more important question. Does any of this truly define who you are? Buddhism has a surprising answer to this question, and that answer is that the self doesn't exist the way we think it does. This concept is called anatta, or no self. It teaches that the fixed idea of identity we have, this idea of I am this or I am that, is an illusion. We grow up believing that there is a solid, unchanging I. But when we stop to examine it, we realize that this identity is constantly shifting. Think about this. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? Probably not. Your opinions have changed, your tastes have changed, your beliefs have changed. What you considered important in the past may be irrelevant today. If everything is changing all the time, where is this fixed I? In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a story that explains this brilliantly. A disciple asked Buddha, "Master, who am I?" Buddha pointed to a river and said, "Look at this water." The river appears to be the same, but the water is never the same. It's always flowing, always changing. So is your identity. You are never the same from one moment to the next. You only believe you are because your mind creates a continuous story. The disciple remained silent, watching the river, and realized the truth. We suffer because we cling to a fixed identity, believing we are something unchanging. But this becomes a trap. How many times have you trapped yourself with thoughts like, I am shy, so I can't do this, or I am an anxious person, so I can't change? How many opportunities have you missed by believing your identity is something rigid instead of something flexible and changeable? Buddhism teaches that when we stop clinging to this fixed idea of who we are, we find freedom. If there is no fixed I, then you can reinvent yourself at any moment. You don't have to be stuck with your limitations. You don't need to carry labels that no longer serve you. You can change, adapt, and grow. This also applies to how we see others. Often, we judge someone based on a specific moment and label that person based on a single experience. But is that really who they are? Or just like us, are they also constantly changing? The illusion of the self also causes us to suffer because it leads to a constant need for protection and coherence. We want to be seen in a certain way, we want to be validated, we want others to recognize us as successful, smart, or important. We create a persona and spend our lives trying to keep it intact. But this is an impossible battle because everything changes, and trying to hold on to something that's always slipping away is a recipe for frustration. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't exist. It means that you're not a solid fixed block. You are a flow, a process, a story in the making. And when you accept this, something amazing happens. Life becomes lighter. You stop taking yourself so seriously. You stop clinging to labels that limit you. You stop comparing yourself to others because you realize that everyone is in the same process of change. In the end, the big insight of Buddhism isn't to say that you don't exist. It's to say that you don't need to cling so tightly to a fixed idea of who you are. Because if everything changes, then you can change too. And maybe that's true freedom. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to carry a lightness in life, as if everything flows more easily for them? People who, wherever they go, spread something good and somehow it always comes back to them? Buddhism teaches that this isn't a coincidence. There's a principle called metta that can completely transform the way we live and relate to others. Metta means unconditional love, but not in a romantic sense. It's genuine kindness, a deep wish for the well-being of all, without expecting anything in return. In Buddhism, metta is not just a feeling, but a daily practice. It's a training of the mind and heart so that, little by little, compassion becomes natural. And then comes the question, why is this so important? Because the way we treat others directly reflects what we receive from life. When you act with generosity, patience, and kindness, you create an environment where these same energies return to you. But when you act with harshness, selfishness, or resentment, your own life becomes heavier. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a story that explains this brilliantly. A young disciple went to Buddha and asked, "Master, why are some people so unhappy, even when they have everything, and others, even with nothing, seem to live in peace?" Buddha answered, "Imagine you're holding a hot coal to throw at someone before it hits the other person, who is the first to burn." The disciple remained silent. So, it is with anger, hatred, and greed. You may want to hurt another person, but before anything else, you're the one who suffers. Likewise, when we cultivate compassion and kindness, the first beneficiary is ourselves. Generosity and unconditional love are not just about others. They are about the impact these qualities have within us. When you act with kindness, something inside you changes. You feel lighter, more connected, more at peace. But how can we put this into practice? Buddhism teaches a meditation called metta meditation, which involves directing thoughts of love and compassion, first toward yourself, then to those close to you, then to strangers, and finally, even to those you consider difficult. This teaches us that kindness shouldn't depend on how others treat us. We should offer it simply because it is the right thing to do. But metta doesn't have to be just a meditation. It can be lived daily, small gestures of kindness, words of encouragement, patience with others, acts of generosity without expecting anything in return. This doesn't mean being naive or letting others take advantage of you. It means acting with a light heart, without carrying the weight of resentment and hatred. Because in the end, what you put into the world always finds its way back to you. So the question that remains is, what have you been sending into the world lately? After everything we've talked about so far, you might be thinking, okay, all of this makes sense, but do these teachings apply to me? Do I need to become a Buddhist to put them into practice? And the answer is, absolutely not. Buddhism is not a set of dogmas or rules that require full adherence. It is, above all, a path to understanding life. Its teachings do not rely on blind faith or mandatory rituals. They are reflections on the human mind, on how we suffer and how we can live more lightly and consciously. And the most interesting part, many of these ideas are already present in other philosophies and traditions. The concept of compassion is not exclusive to Buddhism. The idea that what you do returns to you also appears in other cultures. The practice of being present in the moment, the value of balance, the understanding that everything changes, none of this requires you to follow a religion. In the Big Book of Buddhism, there's a passage where a disciple asked Buddha, "Master, what if someone follows your teachings but doesn't want to be called a Buddhist?" And Buddha replied, "If someone learns how to swim but doesn't become a professional swimmer, can they still benefit from the water? If someone learns how to cook but doesn't become a chef, can they still enjoy the food?" So it is with the teaching. It doesn't matter what you call them. What matters is whether they make sense to you and improve your life. And that's the great truth. Buddhism doesn't want to convert anyone. It simply offers a path, and you can take from it whatever makes sense to you. You don't need to believe in the concept of karma to understand that your actions have consequences. You don't need to meditate for hours a day to realize that living in the present makes you happier. You don't need to give up your beliefs to accept that excessive attachment can bring suffering. What Buddhism teaches are universal principles, ideas that anyone can apply regardless of where they come from, what they believe, or how they live their life. So, in the end, the question isn't whether you need to be a Buddhist. The question is, which of these lessons do you want to bring into your life? If any of these concepts resonated with you, try them out. Test them in your daily life, see what works. After all, as we've said before, Buddhism teaches that true wisdom doesn't come from believing what you're told, but from observing and experiencing it for yourself. And now, tell me, which of these ideas had the biggest impact on you? Have you already applied any of these concepts in your life? Or is there something you plan to test starting today? I'd love to know your opinion in the comments. And if this video made you reflect, don't forget to leave a like to help this content reach more people. Subscribe to the channel to continue following more reflections like this, and activate the bell so you don't miss the upcoming videos. See you next time.